the way, this is one promise Barack Obama kept. He actually said in June, actually I think it was election night, it was the fall of 2008, he actually said this: we're going to be the presidency that heals the planet and sees the sea levels drop. And he's actually done it. Since he's been president, global sea level has dropped. So all the criticism you can have of Obama, one thing you can't is he kept his sea level promise.
Man,
of course I'm joking.
No, he's like God or something, then you're saying.
Yeah, he's got powers and ability far beyond those of mortal men. And this is, but this goes across the board, though. Mount Kilimanjaro, a mockery. It's gaining snow and ice. Guides out there just recently, and I believe it was a Bloomberg or Reuters article, the guides are saying that the snow and ice is increasing. And people like Michael Mann, the scientist from Penn State University, who's the center of the ClimateGate scandal, will still use stuff like, proof of man-made global warming. Look at Mount Kilimanjaro. The ice is melting. It's not anymore. And even if it did before, it wasn't due to global warming or temperatures. It was due to local land use issues. So it's an amazing thing to watch this. I went to the UN conference in Durban. It was akin to medieval witchcraft. They no longer talk about global temperatures. Hardly at all. It's all about, during the week we were here at this UN conference, there was a flood here, a hurricane here, a tornado here, an earthquake here. They're now turned every weather event into proof of man-made global warming. You can't falsify the theory. This is akin to the Middle Ages when you'd say we never had weather like that until that witch moved in next door. And Al Gore did his 24 Hours of Climate Reality, and he was ridiculed. I did a whole report. Dozens of global warming committed believers and environmental activists trashed Gore, winced, distanced themselves. Al Gore can no longer command his own friends to support him. That's how bad it's become.
All right, Mark, I want
to none other to Keith Olbermann as his only way to save his network. That's what Al Gore. When you have to grovel to Keith Olbermann to save yourself, you're gone.
No, he is gone. So that leads us to the next question. We can't just let him regroup and cook up new frauds. 20 years after Maurice Strong and the UN openly said, quote, "We will use environmentalism and carbon taxes to shut down the industrial world. Our goal is a post-industrial world." This official neo-feudalistic model where government shuts down everybody but a select inner coterie of crony capitalists and then socializes all the other wealth to make us dependent, they're coming back. So how do we stop them? I mean, you're explaining it's going to be let the termites vote. The government's going to represent animal rights now, species extinction. How do we route them?
Well, here's the thing. If they get a hold of biodiversity, which is the umbrella, sustainable development, species extinction, deforestation, it's brilliant. It even surpasses CO2 as a master control mechanism, because now if you want to do anything, if you have biodiversity, which is just essentially all ranges of the planet's systems, that means you can control the oceans, you can control fisheries, ship lanes, you can control land use, you can control transportation, roads, food distribution, agriculture. This is in a way, they probably mishandled themselves by going after global warming in the 1980s. They should have committed themselves to this, because if they had achieved master control of biodiversity like they want, plants, animals, species on Earth, they would be able to control every possible aspect of our lives, and that's what they're going for. They're looking for a super EPA right now. Over 100 countries have endorsed the concept, and what's scary is this stuff usually happened under Republican presidents. George Herbert Walker Bush, the first Bush, got us into the mess in Rio. Instead of, and I don't argue presidents should ignore these conferences. I think both Bushes, both the first Bush and George W. Bush, should have attended UN conferences. They should have given speeches ridiculing, mocking, and insulting the UN and laughed at the boos they got. That's what a U.S. president should do. That's how you handle it. Instead, what Republican presidents and Democrat presidents alike do is they're going to continue to fund the UN. They're going to continue to rubber stamp their science reports, be they on species or climate. They're going to continue to have their administration support it. They're going to continue to send delegations to support the process. And as far as I know, no Republican presidential candidate thus far, and I don't know exactly if Ron Paul's addressed this, has called for withdrawing from everything related to the at least.
No. Ron Paul has called for the U.S. to get out of the UN and to get out of that, and he's the only one. And the reason is the big mega banks, the crony capitalists, Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, they fund all the environmental groups. They want to sell these carbon taxes. They want to have this new global tax that Ban Ki-moon, as you know, called for last week. And that's my next question. Agenda 21, as you know, 20 years ago, you're about to go to the new conference, called for global governance, called for every facet of life to be controlled through Agenda 21, smart growth, sustainability. I live in one of the few cities in the U.S. actually implementing it all. I mean, it's just hellish. All of this is happening, and so the establishment wants this. Mitt Romney wants it. Newt Gingrich wants it. Obama wants it, because that's what the ruling elite want. So how do you address the New York Times article yesterday or 2 days ago saying, well, kooks don't want Agenda 21. It's real and taking over, but it's for your best interest. I mean, how is the system going to deal with the fact that people don't trust them anymore and are now aware that the UN is a front for a global corporate takeover of everybody else's systems?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. This is the Agenda 21 deals with sustainable development, the economy, equity, environment, social justice. These are the words, code words for redistribution of wealth. It's essentially an abolishment of private property if they get their way. But they're smart about it. It's incremental. It's a little bit slower. It doesn't happen overnight. And what happened was this was set into motion back at the Earth Summit in 1992 when the first George Bush went. And God knows why he went and why he legitimized this and why he committed us to this, but he did. And now as we go forward, they're going to resurrect that now in 2012 at this conference upcoming in Rio, Earth Summit Plus 20. And it's actually a brilliant scheme because it's behind the scenes in states, localities, counties across the country are slowly able to start implementing parts of this agenda. And it's creeping up all around us without you even being aware of it. And it's a very frightening thing. And again, there's no real government opposition, no one in government, no establishment opposition to this, and that is where they can succeed, and that is where the greatest threats come from, is the fact that no one's even aware of it, and that's what we have here with Agenda 21 and what's happening. And coming up in June, this is going to be, again, probably much, much bigger than any previous global warming conference. The United Nations and the environmentalists are so excited about this conference because it's new, it's different, and they have a whole bunch of new science, in quotes, that the IPCC-like panel of the UN is already producing, trying to scare people. What people need to realize is that 99.9% of all species have gone extinct, and extinction is a natural process. And to sit there and fret over every single species, they first of all claim 50,000 species go extinct a year, but they don't actually exist. There's things like amoebas and bacteria. When you press them to name names, they're actually just species of...
No, they admit it's algorithms, like you said last night on the Nightly News, and I've seen that. They admit it's computer program models, but let's expand. Schwarzenegger said, as you know, in USA Today in 2010, he said, listen, we're going to go to local governments and do this since the feds won't do it. Is that not infiltration? I mean, if the Russians came over here and said, we're going to lobby your local government and pay them off to pay us tax money, that would be treason, sedition, infiltration, espionage. How is it not espionage when the UN and George Soros and globalists come in and say in USA Today, we're going to do an end run around your elected representatives. We're going to do this. I mean, they should be arrested. This is a criminal takeover. Let's call it what it is, Mark. Let's stop mincing words. I'm not saying you are, but I think it's time to really call it what it is. These are criminals trying to hijack our infrastructure, and it makes me sick.
Well, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, as a leader, they couldn't have picked a more absurd and appropriate figure. Here's a guy who did everything wrong from their point of view. He flew private planes to and from work, daily commute. He had Humvee vehicles, flew all around the world, works in the most environmentally destructive industry in America, which is Hollywood film industry. And he is your environmental spokesman. So that, on the face of it, is perfectly appropriate and absurd all at the same time. Schwarzenegger is going around now. He's now they're calling him the Incredible Hulk. He went from the Terminator to the Incredible Hulk. He is now the green spokesman, the ambassador around the world, and as you mentioned, state and local governments. I don't know how much success they're having outside of liberal enclaves at this point. I believe it was the city of Boulder, which tried to pass all this different cap-and-trade stuff, and they realized they couldn't even meet the targets, and they admit how hard it was. So the liberal bastions that have tried this stuff years ago are failing. So Schwarzenegger is going to go around. I'm sure Schwarzenegger will be at the Rio conference. The other Hollywood actor, by the way, intimately involved is Harrison Ford. You hate to see it, but Harrison Ford...
Hold on, Mark. I know you've got to go, but do 5 more minutes with us on the other side. I want you to be able to finish. Tell us what else is happening at climatedepot.com and how we beat these people, because these are the authoritarians. These people are scum. Now, you know we've had Lord Monckton on many times. You know I've made the film Endgame, Blueprint for Global Enslavement, where the UN, Prince Philip, Ted Turner, Jacques Cousteau, Bill Gates, all of them admit environmentalism is to be used to shut off energy and reduce world population, use food as a weapon. Henry Kissinger, Memorandum 200, State Department, CIA. This is about eugenics. And I want to ask two questions of Marc Morano from Climate Depot, one of the leading experts out there on this, advisor to Congress. And everything he's broken down over the last decade that I've been following him has turned out to be dead on target. Two things. How do we beat them, A, and then B? I'd like you to speak to the whole world government, world tax. It's now out in the open. We won't get attacked by, you know, the big neocon talk show hosts for talking about reality. It's out in the open now. The world government element, the eugenics, population reduction, because Lord Monckton's numbers is if they did the Copenhagen cuts, it would be over 1 billion people in 10 years would die who are on $2 a day or less. The revolutions that'll come out of turning off the infrastructure. I mean, this is feudalism. So I'd like you to speak to their master plan and how we beat these authoritarians.
Well, they want a more primitivism back in the world. And overpopulation was huge in the 1960s and 70s. They realized soon that that imploded under its own weight. It's still there, though. People like John Holdren, Obama's science czar, are still pushing the idea that mankind is, you know, there's too many people on Earth and we got to get rid of it. I think Bill Gates was last on record as saying that the world would be a lot better with 2 billion less people. So it's a very scary thing. So you look at it, you say, okay, they're worried about that. Well, what are their policies? Well, you look at their policies, 1.6 billion people don't have running water and electricity. Right now, they are being prevented. Obama has been stopping and helping pressure to stop international development of coal plants in Africa. The country of Chad had a UN-inspired ban on burning charcoal, which led to, quote, desperate families. UK grocery stores bought local and hurt black African farmers. India has said they won't sign on to UN treaties when 40% of their residents don't have running water and electricity. John Holdren actually opposed Norman Borlaug's agricultural revolution in the 60s and 70s that saved millions and possibly billions of people from famine, the golden rice and the way they revolutionized agriculture to feed a planet. John Holdren's reason, and we uncovered the old articles and documents, he said that he didn't want the planet to support that many people. He would rather, and literally is on record as saying that people should rather die before you would allow agricultural revolution to feed these people. So they don't want the people on the planet. And beyond that, we have the German climate advisor calling for a CO2 budget for every man, woman, and child on the planet. The UK government has proposed carbon ration cards for employers to monitor their employees' train travel, air travel, your home energy use, and how much you're using. It's the most intrusive stuff that Orwell couldn't even have contemplated. So this is all happening. Al Gore has said the climate bill was the first step toward global governance. So many different UN officials have called for this. The global EPA is now going to be on the table coming up to the Rio Summit. This is all what's happening. The idea is the Earth is so fragile that we've destroyed it, that people can't be left to free minds, free markets, that we need bureaucratic bean counters to essentially run our lives, everything from our shower heads to our toilets to our washing machines to our dishwashers to our ice makers to our bedtime, and you go right on up the list. As Nancy Pelosi said, in China, of all places, we need a complete inventory on every aspect of our lives to fight global warming. And now I would add to that to fight species extinction and biodiversity. Remember what the founder of Patrick Moore, the co-founder of Greenpeace, has said, that today's environmental movement is probably the most anti-human agenda he's ever witnessed.